Welcome to the Institute for Holistic Health Studies at San Francisco State's Gandhi-King Season for Nonviolence program. I am your co-host, Amber Yang, the Restorative Justice and Wellness Coordinator for a Bay Area school district, along with Ken Burrows, Director of the Holistic Health Learning Center at San Francisco State. Join us for 80 days of practice, celebrating the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. in applying nonviolent principles of love, wisdom, and cultural transformation to daily life. Today's focus is on restorative justice, moving beyond punishment and control to healing and restoration in our school communities. Martin Luther King Jr. once shared that we need a love strategy to address the existing injustices and dysfunctionalities of the world. He talked about the concept of agape, a Greek word that is defined by the moral imperative to restore community and seek the greater good in all. And restorative justice works to do that in our schools and our criminal justice systems. On a basic level, restorative justice is an alternative evidence-based approach to justice that works to prevent and reduce harm and violence in a community. Traditionally, when harm is done in a community, we're used to seeing some level of punishment done on the individuals who have created the harm, and a lack of addressing the needs of those experiencing the harm. And we see this with the rise of school suspensions and expulsions, zero-tolerance policies, suppression tactics, the war on drugs, harsh jail and prison sentences, and worst of all, solitary confinement. And while some may see its benefits, one must question, is the punitive approach working? Punitive meaning punishment that inflicts pain and separation to get people to change. While suspensions in schools are increasing, a 2021 study from the American Institutes for Research shows that suspending students does little to reduce harm, nor did it result in improved academic achievement or perceptions of positive school climate. Anyone familiar with the school-to-prison pipeline? This is a common metaphor used to describe the ways in which students are pushed out of the education system and into the juvenile hall and criminal justice systems, disproportionately affecting Black, brown, and low-income communities. And while many cities spend more on policing and incarceration systems than on health, housing, arts, parks, community development, workforce development, and civil rights combined, the United States incarceration rate increased by 220% between 1980 and 2014. And within 3 years of release, 2 out of 3 people in U.S. prisons are rearrested, and more than 50% are incarcerated again. This is recidivism that's gone unchecked. So, is the punishment approach really working? Restorative justice philosophy says that the separation from the community and the disruption of relationships caused by punitive discipline often does more harm, and while punitive justice focuses more on what rule was broken, restorative justice focuses more on what relationships were harmed and what needs repairing and restoring. Before the Western world claimed the term restorative justice, these practices were deeply embedded in indigenous peacemaking practices. Robert Yazzie, Chief Justice Emeritus of the Navajo Nation Supreme Court for 18 years, shares that the peacemaking process is related to the concept of ke, to restore dignity, to restore worthiness to all. He shared that as we grow from childhood, some of us have learned ways of responding to fear, trauma, and for many, abuse and oppression. Yazzie calls this the compass of shame, where those who didn't have loving and positive relationships and role modeling, those who often didn't get their basic needs met, often will choose to rely on hurting themselves or others through drugs and violence to respond to their pain. These behaviors cannot be addressed through suppression tactics and punishment, but by calling them into the community and showing them that there are better ways of dealing with what challenges them. So restorative justice takes a deep dive to uncover the root causes of harm, conflict, and violence. Practices involve mentoring and coaching, conflict resolution and peacemaking circles, alternatives to punitive discipline that helps and not punishes, and community building practices. These all serve to hold those who've harmed accountable to their actions, while also strengthening community relationships, honoring and acknowledging human needs, and amplifying a sense of belonging. Because the more belonging someone feels, the less likely they want to harm. And as someone who does this work for a living, I have seen the powerful transformations in young people when they're called in and not called out. So here to talk about this today are people actually in the trenches doing this work with me. John Wallace, founder of Surviving the Odds Project, and Phoebe Smith, veteran teacher and restorative justice lead for a Bay Area school district. All right. So, hey there, John and Phoebe. Thanks for being here with me today in a conversation about restorative justice and how it's transformed our lives and the work we do and in the community that we're a part of. So, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure. So, here we are in a time where social justice issues, racial justice issues, violence, global war is at the forefront of our newspapers and conversations. And just to acknowledge, it's easy to get caught up in the sense of overwhelm and anger about what's happening in the world. And yet, what I think the three of us have in common is the passion to help redefine and explore the world we want to live in. And I think that the three of us have chosen restorative justice work as part of that journey to help heal this world, right? So I want to begin by getting both of your voices into the room. And Phoebe, I'll start with you. Describe the restorative justice work you do and what calls you to this work. Why does this matter to you?
Thank you, Amber. I work in the school district, implementing and integrating restorative practices. Most school systems really rely on punitive systems to address discipline with students. And as we know, punitive actions do not work. And I think we've come to a time now, like COVID has really uncovered and highlighted a lot of our societal issues. And I think that many people in education right now would be able to attest to the fact that, you know, our students are really crying out for help and are in more need of social and emotional support than ever before. But I think it also highlights just this idea and this lacking that students have had for a really long time of being connected and being in relationship with the people that they spend a large part of their day with and entrust their futures to, actually. I feel very blessed to have started practicing restorative practices in my classroom when I got to the point where it was just untenable to have all of the responsibility of educating all of my students on me solely as the teacher. I realized that I had to employ my community, my classroom community, to help and support one another in their learning. And literally, they did not know how to talk to each other. They did not know how to support each other. They didn't know how to listen to someone and build on an idea. And they did not know how to execute or be in those spaces with each other at all. That was mind-blowing to me. But it's so indicative of our education system and how we teach our students to engage with one another, which is, that's the last thing on the list, is learning how to engage with one another. So with these tools that I've learned how to implement through restorative practices, we get to take all of the character building models that we're taught. We get to take all of the expectations that society teaches us to be, like, be kind, do good, and all of these things. We get to actually learn how to do that and be that way with each other in real time through restorative practices. And so that's why I left the classroom after 18 years and decided to focus solely on being a restorative practices practitioner. For me, to not just be on the outskirts coaching in, but coming into the community and becoming a part of that community so that I can build trust and build relationship. They see that I care and they see that I have insights into some of the issues that the community is dealing with, because I'm a part of the community myself. Restorative practices in and of itself is a paradigm shift. And so in the space with students, families, staff, you know, I've worked with teacher cohorts and teams, help resolving conflict with them. In those spaces, I've seen transformative work happening. I see people really being able to get past a conflict and actually use that conflict to grow and learn more about their fellow human being, right? Not the label that they had on that person beforehand that actually caused conflict because there were so many assumptions and filters that the people and experiences that people were seeing other people through or what have you that caused the conflict, but that they're actually able to confront those assumptions, talk them through, and then get to the other side and get to an even stronger place as a community.
Mm.
Those have been some really beautiful moments. But of course, my favorite moments are working with the students and showing them that there's another way that we as human beings can be with one another,
Mm.
and for them to just soak it in like, oh my God, Miss Phoebe, this is so awesome, and realizing that. And then so what I see then is I'm on campuses, and then you have students running over to me saying, Miss Phoebe, we're having this issue. Can we get a circle dialogue? It was like, yes, you know so that's the transformation that I have seen, and everyone has to be on board for it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to be in agreement that this needs to happen, this shift in the way that we engage with one another, the way we treat one another, the way we speak to one another. If I'm a community member and you're a community member, no one is more important and no one should be discarded.
Mm.
Right? So in that, we find a way to be with each other where everyone feels valued, heard, and respected. So, and I think that that's a lot of the issues that we find in our current academic environments, where those things are not only not forefronted, but they're not even on the list, like, of importance, right?
Yeah, this paradigm shift you're talking about is so real, especially as the restorative practices practitioner in the same school district. And actually, John, Freedom, you have your own personal transformation in that regard. And also now you are working with students, right? So I think it'd be a perfect time for you to describe your work and what you do and just what calls you to this work.
All right. Thank you so much. And Phoebe, thank you. It's an honor. So the work that I do on a day in and day out is I show up. I am the founder of a nonprofit called Surviving the Odds Project, and it's video production music therapy for our youth.
Mm.
We put music studios around various areas and mainly in high schools, alternative education high schools so far, to give kids a creative outlet towards music and to have them tell their story about their lived experience. It could be anything that kids are going through, but we try to, if it's depression, whatever it is, we have them write a song about what they're going through. And
Mm.
it releases trauma, it releases, all these crazy thoughts that these kids would be having, and it shows community support. And So I also love this work because I also sit on a board of directors for New Beginnings Law Center. Part of that work is that I help clear up criminal background records for people coming home with probation, parole, all that stuff, because I served many years in state prison for crimes that I wish I would have had help with and stuff. So part of the transformation in my life came through an intervention in prison. And I didn't know that music would be my career today. But after serving so many years in prison, I started writing songs. I wrote over 75 songs while I was in my cell at San Quentin State Prison. And I brought those songs home. I locked them up in a safe and didn't even look at them again.
Mm.
There's probably about 10 of those songs that I actually wrote and released to the world, but the other ones were for my self-healing, right? What got me here? Why the choices that I made to in life to get me behind this cell, in the cell.
Mm.
And so I haven't even gone back to look at some of those songs, but they're there. I know they're there, and so what I do is I try to reach out to these youth to break the pipeline, that prison pipeline, and give them a creative outlet, because if I had someone to talk to when I was younger, some of the decisions I would have made would have probably been totally different. And so music heals. We know music heals. And Surviving the Odds Project is just an antidote. It's not the medicine. It's just like something that can help these kids start thinking differently. Like, oh my God, I'm doing a song. Like, the goal of our program is to get them to write a song, get them to shoot a music video to their song, and get them to perform that song in front of the community. And
Mm.
and then I usually surprise the kids with a, limousine ride into San Francisco for a photo shoot afterwards with, various people. If I can get celebrities in there, great for them, to give them that opportunity to see what the possibilities can happen if you choose music.
Mm.
You choose music over violence, you choose music over hate, you choose music over everything. Like music can take you places. And so that's pretty much what I do. And the work is not easy, but it's fun. It's rewarding. We try to restore communities, and the way that we can restore communities is to give them more creative expression platforms.
Mm. I love what you're sharing because like on a, relational level, as you said, Phoebe, learning how to be in conflict, learning how to um, lean into that sense of working through conflict and building deeper relationships, and also finding meaning and purpose, like music, to kind of guide us through and help us transform some of the more traumatic or more challenging parts of our lives. I think that it really shows us, and it shows the students we work with, what's possible. Like, we don't always have to be struggling within the oppressive systems we live in, or the systems that we created for ourselves. That maybe it's possible we can actually be who we want to be. And I think that when people are operating from that place, it's like, why would you want to harm? Like, why would you want to hurt others, right? Like, you're in the community, and that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose drives us. Well, it actually reminds me of a student I worked with who, and Phoebe knows this because I spent a lot of time with this student where, he was beginning of high school, just caught up in drug life, gang life, violence. Maybe would show up to school once a month at best. And the times he would come, though, I just would notice him and be like, I wonder what it's like for this kid. What's going on there? And I think for the three of us, it starts with the curiosity about like what's going on with that student, not like, oh, that student's not showing up to class. And he and I just ended up building a relationship, and I got to know a lot about the traumas, the deep
Mm,
traumas he faced as a Native American young man, and just the lack of hardly any support through his whole K through 12 experience so far. No one has asked him, "How are you?" And
wow.
we would meet every week to talk through social emotional challenges, talk through academic goals, what he wanted for his whole life. And sooner or later, after a few months, he started showing up to school more. He started building those relationships. And I literally saw the light in his eyes begin to form. And at one point, he was like, wow, I've never felt like I mattered. I never felt like I actually meant something. And now I do. And it's like weird, but I like it. And he started like wearing clothes that he liked more. And he got his grades up to like B's and C's, and he got really anchored in his goal to graduate high school and possibly go to the military and start a family. And he had all these things anchored him. And that transformation is what I live for. And you see it so much when students feel like, wow, I matter, and someone sees that I matter. And so what's possible? Well, there's so much more than what we were taught and what we grew up with.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just want to like name a really important aspect of the work that we do. It's community building,
Mm.
and that everyone is involved and engaged and counts inside of that, right? I just remember when restorative practices was first introduced to me as a teacher. The administrator who introduced it, like he had the idea in his head. Like, I don't think anybody really knew like the power or the reach of restorative practices until like 10 years later. Like, we're 10 years later now, right, with the
Mm.
introduction of it, because it was basically introduced to the educational to educational world through juvenile hall first, and then in schools. That's huge, right? Where there is a repairing of harm, to the person that's been harmed, or the people in your life that's been harmed. Like that whole process, you go through that whole process, hopefully coming together to actually, um, you know, be in the same space with that person, and share your remorse for the harm that was done and what have you. So that's a whole nother component. But inside of the educational system, when it was brought to me, I was totally bewildered by what they were suggesting. Because they were making it seem like it was my fault. Like, okay, the kids are really bad and we don't know what to do about it. And so we're going to start doing restorative practices. One, the first and foremost reason is because we can't suspend anymore. Like there's a state law that says we can't suspend anymore. And then the other reason is because if we can't suspend, then what are we gonna do with these bad kids? You know? So what you all need to start doing is doing restorative justice, right? Now as a restorative practice practitioner, it's not what you do, it's who you're being. Right? It's how you show up in spaces with people, right? All kids, all of the students, all of the staff, everyone, like how you show up in spaces. And so I just did a really cool meeting around mindfulness, not mindfulness practices, but a state of mind that you take into spaces when you're connecting with people inside of their humanity. And that's all. And then I was just wondering too, when you were talking, John, about your own experience. Well, first, what connection do you feel restorative practices has to the work that you're introducing? Not just music, not just being, delving into the creative side of students, but like around community building or what have you, like what do you really see happening with your students that you feel is a form of restoration spiritually, emotionally, socially for our students?
Some of these kids have never had a meal together at a table at home, right? So I designed a program that's like family. We eat together, we play together, and we get serious together, right? So we do an icebreaker when the kids first come into the program, and I say, I'm going to tell you something about myself that no one else knows. And I hope that this stays in this group. This is a therapeutic environment for you to express yourself and express anything you want in this room. It stays here. What's said here stays here and does not leave these rooms. And so right there, I tell them something about myself, and I build trust with these students, with these kids. And then what happens next is they open up about things they've never told anyone, right? And then they trust the process. They trust this group, right? They're like, damn, I have family here now. Whoa, and then we eat. And then by the time we start the music classes where we're writing, these kids don't want to leave. They're just like, they're so into it. So it builds community. And part of the restorative justice practice that I try to do now is we are partnered with Marin County Youth Court, and we're partnered with, so the kids, my thing is, you make a bad decision, you do something wrong, why go to juvenile hall for it, right? If there's an alternative for you to do other than time in jail or prison or whatever, I wish I had that. But they come through my 8-week music program. They give them an alternative to.
Wow.
Once they complete that case goes away. That is restorative justice in my eyes, for the community. And I think it works on all levels when these kids are given a different way to look at things. So I was one of those kids. I'm talking about myself. I never had an opportunity to sit at a table with my family and have dinner.
Yes.
Right. But I would always go to my white friends' houses and I would sit at these tables and they would, I'm like, what is this? Why don't my family do this for me? Why am I different? Why do they get that and I get this? And it's not fair. I started with like saying all that stuff. It's not fair. And then I started thinking I'm a victim of my own circumstances. Right. And it's not my fault that I'm in this situation. I was just, I was brought into this world. And this is what I tell these kids. You're brought into this world to die. Your time is ticking. It is up to you every day to be the best version of yourself and to know that anything is possible. So that's why I wake up every morning and say, all right, today is going to be the first day of the best day of my life.
Mm.
And how does that look?
When students get referred to me for restorative practices, if they've like smoked weed or, get into a verbal altercation, it's like you basically got a ticket to having a life coach, someone who can guide you through the process of your own life
True.
and to help you see for yourself, like what's possible in your own lives. It really requires, though, that we move out of this mindset that, oh, if you did something harmful, you need to be harmed back for you to learn, right? And I think that this paradigm shift is moving out of that, right? And moving into, if you did something wrong, let's look at what needs repairing, and let's make sure you're still part of this community regardless. And I think that that's where the change happens, is I matter here no matter what I did, and I'm more than what I've done, right? I'm more than what has happened to me. So thank you, John, for so beautifully articulating that with your own process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Amber, and I'm interested from your perspective, how you tie your work in with this this huge undertaking that you've taken on to really show up and be a force during the season of nonviolence.
Mm.
How do you bring the work that you're doing together with the things that you've learned through the season of nonviolence and the spirit of it of itself?
Oh, that's a beautiful question and a huge question. For some reason, the first thing that comes up is like, I think, I find that this work chose me as much as I chose this work. And I never thought I would be here when I was like in high school with the high schoolers I work with. When I was their age, I mean, if you would have asked that person back then what I'd be doing now, I'd laugh in your face, like, what? You know? But I think that we often choose work that helps us heal our own past. And, I grew up in a really punitive household where abuse and violence was how my parents decided to teach me things. And then I learned that for myself. I internalized that and, found myself using violence, verbal, physical, whatever, as a way to solve problems. And so here I am in this work, healing a lot of my own wounds of what it's like to help people and to be there with people.
Mm.
And so when I first heard about, the Season for Nonviolence, when I was an intern in the Holistic Health Studies program, the nonviolence was like almost a way for me to connect all the dots of the paradigm shift, as you said, to creating a world, like Martin Luther King says, the beloved community, right? It's not enough to just be angry at the oppressors and to call out the existing injustices. It's like, well, what is the alternative world? What is the world that we want to create that helps us transform the violence and trauma that our society faces? And that was like the lock-in key, where it's like, oh, restorative justice, it's all about bringing people in and loving them up no matter who they are. And nonviolence is saying the same thing towards everyone, including our oppressors. And so we really create this narrative that we want the greater good for all of us, right? And we recognize that there are certain people and populations who haven't felt that, and people who've experienced a lot of it and have the privilege of that. And yet, how do we really bridge that divide and bridge that gap while also really foregrounding the greater good in all of us, no matter who we are? I think for me, it's like, I see this as my work no matter where I am. I think that restorative practices shows up in all, like from my relationship with my partner to my family to people out on the streets. It's really meeting people with that sense of goodness.
I would say that two very significant things that happened in our history shifted me in my consciousness and how I was gonna show up in the world. And one was in 2008 when Barack Obama became president, and just like the world of possibility opening up in my Black person's mind, and also the messaging that he brought during his time in office around Martin Luther King's work, his life's purpose, which is service. And then the other life-changing thing that actually propelled me into my activism was the murder of George Floyd, May of 2020. That, oh, you're gonna have to be an activist. It's like, oh, no. it wasn't done in history. Like, we still here. We still dealing with this stuff. So like that, then I'm like, oh, it's the current generation's job to honor and to hold on to the progress that our ancestors made, right? It doesn't just remain just because it happened. We actually have to actively work on holding on to that progress and forwarding that progress, right? So ever since then, I've really been like really focusing on how can I not just be performative in my thinking and in my actions, but to actually have these things show up in real time, that we're actually becoming those things. And then so John, I see the work that you're doing is like such a beautiful piece of what we try and show students, right? And the adults that we work with. I don't even know like what your bad days look like, but you show up like joyful all the time to me. How do you connect your passion and purpose and what you're doing in your life with the principles that this mighty ancestor of ours, Martin Luther King, impressed upon us to do?
Oh my God. Man, Martin Luther King is like my idol. The way that I show up on a day in and day out, like, I'm just grateful that I'm alive, because I know that there was many situations I put myself in, that I allowed myself to be in, when I knew I had the choice to make a better decision, right? And so every time I get ready to go to bed at night, I always try to constructively review my day. Like, and one of the things I say to myself is, who did you help? There's a gift I found, and it was recovery, right? Because once anything goes in my body to make me feel a certain way, it gives me a mind-altering feeling, right? And it was told to me one time by one of my mentors. He said, you are a threat to yourself and to society when you are under the influence of a mind-altering drug. And I was like, damn, he is so right. And I thought about all the things that became unmanageable in my life when that's happened. I've been to jail and prison. I've been arrested over 19 times. And that's no, fabrication, because when I was in jail, an officer said, man, do you see the progression of your life? Like, look at all these mug shots of yourself. They get worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, ooh. And he showed me. And that eye-opening experience for me wasn't enough, because I was so blind to what he was trying to tell me. He was like, wake up, you are about to die. You're about to die. And my mentor told me, he said, I'm just trying not to be that guy giving your eulogy to this crowd of people and saying that you built this beautiful program for kids, but you're not around to see it.
Because it's like, if something's dying, what are you giving birth to?
Right?
What's growing out of that death, I said the quote earlier, but I just feel like this so marks you, like, as Phoebe so eloquently mirrored back to you, John, of the Adrienne Marie Brown quote.
Yeah, she did.
I'm about to do it again. When we are born into privilege, we are charged with dismantling any myth of supremacy. And when we're born into struggle, we are charged with reclaiming our joy, our dignity, and our liberation. So I have that memorized up in here, but I just feel like the three of us have found our own way to that dignity, joy, and liberation. Because when you really know that for yourself, the natural thing to do is to share it with others. It's like, what, you're just gonna hoard this all for yourself? No, that doesn't feel right. It's to really share and just exude that out to others. So
this was so authentic. I mean, it's just like, I wouldn't want any way of my Sunday morning to be any other way and to be like of service, you know what I mean? Like this.
Right?
Yes, exactly.